I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everyone? It is Richie here from the F1 podcast. Hope you're having an amazing Wednesday afternoon. I'm here with my co-hosts, Andrew Cleary and Erica Hollingsworth. What up, team? Halfway through the week, right before a long weekend, and we got a back-to-back race weekend.
Nothing screams summertime like some fun racing and some fun holidays, am I right? Yeah.
And it's not only back to back, it's gonna be back to back to back weekends because we're in the midst of a nice little triple header.
A little turkey action going on there for my bowling fans. Ayo, let's do it.
I got a question. Who does our followers think is the best bowling player? I think we should test that theory out one day.
Like, of the three of us, who's the
Yes.
best at bowling? I was like, well, I'm pretty sure there is professional bowling, and you could just Google that. But of
I
the
don't want
three
to
of
brag,
us,
but I was a city champion when I was 8 years old in 5 points.
Okay,
No,
Wii
what?
bowling does not
Yeah.
count.
oh, if it was Wii bowling, I'd kick all y'all's asses.
No,
That's
not this. It wasn't Wii. It was legit league bowling, 5-pin league bowling, and I won like cities in London when I was 8 years old.
Damn, look at you go, man.
Yeah.
Is there any sport involving some hand-eye coordination that you can't do? Because you seem to be pretty good at a lot of them.
That's a great question. No, I'm not amazing at tennis. I'm good at pickleball. Yeah.
I still have never played pickleball.
It is
still
fun.
haven't
It
learned
is
on
so
it.
much fun.
Okay, maybe we also need to do what you know what we need to do? We need to go to Stacked. We need to
Yeah.
rent the court and have a beer and play some pickleball. I'm
I'm
here
down.
for it.
I
On a
have
race
to tell
weekend,
me
we'll like
twice.
let's but you know what? We're not here to talk about pickleball and various paddle sports.
In today's
Sure.
episode, I think we really wanted to cover the Spanish Grand Prix that happened this past weekend. Max Verstappen did win the race. However, we're seeing a new emerger, potentially, someone who will, I don't know, put some pressure into the championship. Mr.
For
Lando
Super
Norris.
Smash Bros. Fans, it's a new challenger approaches.
Yeah. Well, it
Little
might be
alarm
good
sounds in
to
the
cap this
background.
up in the fastest lap recap of the week.
Fastest last recap. So our fastest lap was Lando Norris at 1 minute 11 seconds, 383. So there, I think we're just, what do we want to do? Round to 111.
111.
111.
111.
Doing my best at this one. This is one of the shorter laps of the season, I feel. Oh God, fortunately it's not
It'll be
Canada.
short again this coming week in Austria.
This is true. Fortunately, it wasn't an overly exciting weekend where I have like a ton of crap to cram in 1 minute and 11. But who wants to count me down?
3, 2, 1.
We kicked off the Spanish Grand Prix with Lando Norris beginning on pole for the second time in his career, but the race got off to a bit of an interesting start with George Russell quickly shooting up from P4 to overtake Lando into turn 1. That said, we did see the old Max come back as he quickly made his way to the front of the grid, and at that point in time, it all came down to strategy and tire management. Lando tried to match Max's strategy in order to get back to the front, but was never truly able to hold on to the position, and then did kind of fall back into the leader, fall behind the leader rather. And the name of the game from here on out in the season is going to be strategy. We have 4 teams vying for position at the front of the pack. It's really anyone's game for the championship, both on the team side as well as potentially the driver's side, as Lando Norris moves into second place for the first time in his career. We saw some spicy beef going down between the Ferrari drivers, which led to on-track tension and some incendiary comments after the race. But this allowed Lewis Hamilton to squeeze his way through to his first podium of the season in P3. That said, we finished it out with a classic Max Verstappen P1, Lando Norris in P2, where he's looking quite comfortable this season, and Lewis Hamilton rounding it out at P3.
Nice job.
Amazing.
Nice job.
Thank
So-
you.
I think Erica really summarized the race, so we can just stop right there and end this week's episode. No, all kidding aside, picking a favorite is becoming tougher.
Yep.
While I think that, Max Verstappen will still probably win this season, the competition is getting so competitive, and with the emergence of McLaren, and I'm going to be honest, probably the fastest car on the track right now. I mean, Verstappen did win this weekend, but it wasn't like smooth sailing. And this season, it hasn't really been smooth sailing for him, with other teams gaining in development.
We're seeing that gap that Red Bull had at the start of the season shrink so much over time. I mean, if you think about those first few races, it was over 30 seconds between Max and the next car on the grid. And we've still got a gap, but that's well into single digits at this point in time for the most part. And obviously, as a fan of the papaya, I'm having a swell time this year, but I'm loving that we're getting variety. We've had so much to look at that's different than what we saw the last 2, 3 seasons with Red Bull just dominating.
Yeah, and we were saying in last week's episode how Spain is really kind of the true test of the midseason to see where everybody is in the pecking order. And it's quite clear that we have 4 teams that are very competitive and can fight for podiums, right? Red Bull, well, Max, let's just say Max. We'll go McLaren, both Oscar and Lando can fight. Charles and Carlos, when they're not crashing into each other, will fight for podiums. And then like Lewis and George can fight for podiums, which is fun because you want to see that variety amongst the 4 teams. Really brings a nice competitive element that we were lacking clearly at the start of the season. Like, I mean, if you told me this in Bahrain, this was going to be happening, I thought you would be crazy. But I really do think it's now become the Max versus Lando show. I do think McLaren actually have the quicker car, to be honest with you. It's reacting a lot better than I think Red Bull are in these circuits. But with that said, I think Max is just the better driver compared to Lando, and he's been in this position before. So I think the driver then edges, Red Bull have the driver edge in terms of the lead driver, but I think McLaren overall have the edge in the car, which is, I can't believe I'm saying that after seeing preseason testing, but with all the turmoil that have gone on in Red Bull, I think the development of the car have been kind of pushed back a little bit, especially with Newey out, that they're scrambling internally to kind of figure out ways to upgrade the car, while McLaren have just become a well-oiled machine under Zach Brown now.
They made so many changes at McLaren in terms of just how they structure all the teams within the org too, and it really sounds like it was a swing and a hit on their part instead of, the usual swing and a miss we see sometimes when they go through that. But I'm loving one that we really get a true test of Max at this point. Of course, there was the battle in 2021 with Lewis, but we're seeing it again. Like, this car was a runaway the last 2 seasons, and now he's really having to show what he's made of instead of just relying on the car performance. Because I think there are a few people who were wondering, is he actually that great, or is Red Bull just awesome at engineering? So I kind of love that we're getting the true test there. And we've had 4 different pole sitters in the last 4 races, which I think is incredible. We had Lando this week, we had George in Canada, we had Charles in Monaco, and the week before Monaco, where were we? But that was Max. Was that Miami?
Italy, Emilia Romagna.
Emilia Romagna, thank you. I was like, I don't think that was when we were last in the US, but I'm loving that there is action and movement happening, and it's not just, one team running away with it right now. I'm also loving that we're seeing Mercedes look a little bit more competitive now as well and kind of entering the chat there. So it's just nice when you're not seeing the same 3 names on the podium every week.
And I guess I kind of really want to talk about Mercedes, because I think, we saw the success that they had in the previous weekend in Canada, and we obviously got the chance to see that. But Lewis Hamilton getting on the podium, I think for the first time this season, really like a stress reliever, I would say. And, it was a question that was given to us from the Podium Queens F1. Shout out to Jen. She said, would this be the only podium that we will potentially see for Lewis Hamilton this season? I don't know.
Great question. Now that email surfaced, I don't think this will be the last podium that he had.
What email?
So earlier on in the week, there was a email that was reportedly leaked to the media, close media of F1, that says that basically explicitly states that Lewis is getting secondary treatment compared to George at Mercedes, almost to the point where it's like potential sabotaging. I don't know if it's like really word sabotaging, but like clearly outlining that he's getting secondary treatment compared to George, and that they're not. It made it sound like it was sabotage. So it was so bad to the point where Toto brought the police into the matter in order to identify where the IP address came from, to see where this email leak came from. And the memes after his podium finish was great, because Lewis had a nice smirk in the pennant, and the joke was like, when you release the email that allows you to go from P7 to P3, in the race ahead of George. So I don't think this will be the last podium
What?
finish for Lewis this season. I think, we were kind of hinting at it earlier on in the year about how now that Lewis is leaving, that George is going to get, obviously the preferential treatment, in my opinion, because he's the one staying long term. But if there's an email came out and leaked that explicitly said some information along the lines, I think Lewis is starting to get some more equal treatment.
Jeez, like
My goodness. It kind of begs the question, right? Because I can understand, Lewis is leaving, you want to take care of the people who are staying, but at the same time, you want to maximize your points. Otherwise, you're just setting up the guy who's staying for a crummy start to the next season. And I think it makes sense for them to not just completely like shun Lewis and brush him off to the side. But I hope there's like juicy hot goss and like more that comes out of this because I'm living for
Apparently,
some of the drama.
the police claim that there's no criminal charges that have been made on it and that there will not be criminal charges on it. But literally the email was basically blatant saying it was sabotage of his car since the news, which I thought was incredible.
Can you just picture it like Lewis Hamilton like sneaking around the garage and just like casually like hitting something with a wrench so that one of the mechanics doesn't notice, or like scraping the underside of a car so that it performs a little worse the next day. Like, I don't know, you see people do some weird stuff in certain situations, and I have a feeling that even though these people make money that many of us will never see in our entire lives, they're not above a little petty revenge.
Well, it's funny too because the way he after Canada, he was talking about how I think it was Canada, but even though he finished before, he said it was one of the worst races he's had, sort of idea, right, with the team. And I'm like, this guy feel like, and then his change of tone over the week after this email come, it's quite interesting to see. So maybe it was, someone of his team and honestly sending that throughout.
well,
But
Andrew, sorry to interrupt you. Do you remember what I talked about? Like, how was it last week's episode where it feels like Mercedes is going to this PR campaign that they're back, where they like get like probably one of the top F1 podcasts to talk about the new developments of the car, and then you have this, and now they're getting a little bit better. Like, is this the whole Total Wolf machine coming back? He's like, I'm back, baby.
well, and I think it would be fun to see Lewis on top of the podium soon because he needs to win a race. He hasn't won a race since Jeddah 2021. Like it's a long time ago. But I think this is his 18th consecutive season with an F1 podium, which I believe is a record.
That's unreal. I do think the one sad thing though is that Max tied or surpassed him for number of wins.
Yeah, 61.
61 to 60 since what was it, 2020, something like that?
2020, I think, was when he got his first win. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is like
since his first win in Spain in 2016, Max has won 61 Grand Prix and Hamilton have won 160.
That's wild, man.
I'm sad about that. I don't know.
But for Lewis, though, it's got to be kind of there's a juxtaposition to this point where because you're excited being Mercedes, being on the podium, but you're beating your team for next year.
There's been a couple comments about that in some memes of like Mercedes is doing better than Ferrari. Oh, Mercedes is doing better than Ferrari. Like, I do think some of the issues at Ferrari, like we saw the infighting between Charles and Carlos this weekend. And so I do think some of it is team dynamics. I know I expressed concerns about the team dynamics at Ferrari next year because you've got two stars who are used to being the A player on the team now. Can be great, can be terrible, as we're kind of seeing. So hopefully, it's going to come down to some driver management on the part of Vasseur. But if I'm Lewis, I'm maybe a little nervous about this decision after how strong they looked earlier in the year.
He got asked, I think he did get asked that question in during the press conference of the podiums last week. So then I think he kind of said he's just focusing obviously on the car this year, but then next year. Yeah, I guess let's jump to Ferrari. Obviously, it was Carlos's home race, but I think they weren't really being teammates this weekend. And you saw Leclerc questioning some of the driving motives, and then even at the end of the race, kind of, I wouldn't say charged, but he was determined to have talked to Carlos about the situation. And then Carlos making the comment Charles always complains on the radio. I was like, oh my gosh, what's
What
going
do you
on,
make
guys?
of Ricci? What do you make of Charles's comments too. It was kind of, I think it was a little petty in terms of made him a position because he mentioned he goes like, well, he made the move. I don't think it was right, but knowing that it's kind of his home race at the point of his career, full well knowing that he has an extension at Ferrari for the next 5 years or so on. To me, that is a very loaded comment and something you don't really say out loud, in my opinion, which then led Carlos to his, well, Charles complains a lot after the race comment, right? Which I think is just that's a chink in the armor of Ferrari that we didn't seen all year. So I'm curious what your thoughts on
I
this
think
are.
Fred needs to take him back to Maranello and just say, hey guys, like team, squadra, like figure this shit out, like enough.
He needs to pull an Otmar Safnauer like he did with Ocon and Gasly last year and basically hold them at gunpoint and be like, we are friends. And hold them to that, because right now, like, I know there was drama between the Alpine drivers last year, but I don't remember them talking about it to the media as much as these guys are right now.
And I never thought I thought they were always like great teammates, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
This is kind of the first time where it's gotten bad blood on the air, in my opinion. But Ricci, what are your thoughts on that move that Carlos made on Leclerc? Because I think at the end of the day, I understand what he was doing, but to me, it compromised both of their races.
Well, yeah, in the end, like, was it really worth that? And we've seen this multiple times where Carlos has complained about how Charles is slower, or even Charles has complained. Like, I think that could have been a moment where it could have potentially been another double DNF. And like, that would have made it even worse. I mean, you're racing at the end of the day. I think tensions are high. You didn't have the greatest weekend in Canada. You're hoping for a bounce back. I wouldn't be proud of 5 and 6, especially just how all the strategies for a number of teams and McLaren slowly creeping up. Yeah, I think tensions are high right now in Maranello, and especially those two drivers. I think I think Ferrari will do much better in Austria and in Great Britain, and Fred Vasseur has said that. And I think the question is just like, hopefully this is not a reoccurring thing. And I've said this multiple times, and it's slowly becoming a reoccurring thing of them fighting each other.
Speaking of McLaren, I have a question for Eric. Are you now happy that, after the race, you saw like Zach Brown, he looked not dejected, but he looked frustrated. And then Lando was clearly frustrated with himself on the radio, knowing that he had the win really in his grasp, and he just kind of got overtaken. Yeah, a poor start kind of led to a tough race for him. So I guess in a sense, even though it was like that was a frustrating result, are you happy to a certain extent now, because knowing that they are in that type of mind frame where they pissed that they lose at this
I
point?
love it, honestly. I mean, when was the last time we saw McLaren in this position? Honestly, it's been what, a decade longer since they've been competitive like this. And that was even Oscar finishing P7 in the weekend, was it P7 he finished?
Yeah, he finished.
Yeah, okay.
P7.
Suddenly I'm second guessing myself. I'm like, what? I literally have the results in front of me, but didn't even look at it as I'm saying it. But he was frustrated. And based on his post afterward, you would have thought that he didn't finish in the points the way they were talking about it. So I love that they're in this position where they can be frustrated with a P7 and be like, you know what, he should have been able to overtake the Ferraris and put himself a little bit closer to the podium. It's exciting. I do think, though, that if you're Zach Brown, you can be frustrated, absolutely, but you need to acknowledge that you have two drivers who are not used to being in this position ever in their career. Lando has started twice from that pole position. And so even though he's been on the front row before, it's very different starting P2. You have a little less pressure on you, especially heading into a first turn, than you do in P1. You're still have your wits about you because you know someone's coming for you. They're not used to the strategy that goes into starting from pole. They're not used to having to fight with some of the more competitive cars at the front, because we've seen it in the last few years. Like the top 5 teams, there's like a big drop off to the rest of the grid. So if you're starting in that midfield, it's not as much of a challenge to work your way through it into the points. So I love that they are here, but I think now it comes with refinement. They need to focus on experience, keeping a level headset, and being able to perform at a level that some of the other guys on the grid are used to and know very well that they don't necessarily have the experience in dealing with.
So building off Erica's comment, I think, you talk about that question of frustration. Because even sometimes like starting P2 on certain tracks is even better than starting P1, whether if it's the first turn or something. So let's think about this, before Miami or even before China, we went from Lando Norris never winning a race before, and now he is in the potential to potentially win races now. And it's just now that we need to get his mindset of like understanding that. Yeah, and like the turnaround has been great for McLaren, even where they were, what is it, 2 years ago, where with the Lando and the Ricardo era. So I think, yeah, it's great to see them get mad. And like, even like, I don't know if you guys remember the radio, they were talking about how he should target George. I think when it was the strategies, and then he piped back, he's like, why am I going for George? I should be going for Max. Like, you kind of seen that, like, I don't know, that mindset change from him, or needing to change, just so he can think about like, okay, if I'm now going to be in that top row, this is what we need to do. So I know, let's focus. I wanted to mention something, but another weekend of double points for Alpine. Is this the comeback story of the year?
I'm kind of shocked. I still feel like that car shouldn't be in the points, but that's just me.
Well, Fernando had a tough start, P10. He did get clipped a little bit, kind of then dropped back, and Aston Martin didn't have a really good strategy past that. So yeah, that was an opportunity there, and that kind of let them move up to P10 and P9. But hey, like you never know, right? Like I think that's probably their ceiling for the year, P9 in that case, because the top four teams are clearly ahead of themselves. Now, I think what isn't getting talked about enough, and it sounds crazy to say, but I don't think Max's win this weekend is getting talked up enough about in terms of how well he performed.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's voting Lando driver of the day, and that is complete bullshit for a guy who lost his pole position then to finish P2. Like, come on, F1 fans. Like, let's be real here, all right? Max is not in as strong of a car as McLaren, I think, right now, in my opinion. And they had to get the strategy perfect this week just for him to even win by 2 seconds. So I really think Max pushed it to the limit this week. He had some great overtakes when he needed to get it done, but I really showed that this weekend was the driver made the difference as opposed to the car, in my opinion.
I was gonna say, Erica, how many driver of the days did you sign into? Were you like at an internet coffee shop or something, sending them all in?
No, I'll be honest, I've never voted for driver of the day.
I missed it.
So I am not a part of this whole thing, and I agree with you. I don't think he deserved it. I think Lewis deserved it over him to fight his way through to get that P3, or Max, definitely, because it took effort. This was not easy sailing for him this weekend. I agree. I just think that the Papaya fans are loud and proud this season, and they're really showing it, but I do want to encourage them to recognize the person who deserves it and not just the person whose team you cheer for. So I don't know. I think it's more fun that way. It's like giving someone their kudos, even if they're not necessarily on podium or elsewhere, right? So that's my 2 cents.
I think it should have gone to Logan Sargent.
Sure. Why not?
Richie, you vote for him. He finished 2 laps behind, but he did a good
I
job.
couldn't. I tried to actually vote, and then it was like, you can't vote anymore. And I was like, well, I tried to do my civil duty.
Did you see that they were testing the race graphics throughout the week, and they test in I saw a picture, they test the race graphic in terms of race wins, and they always test it for the next race win. So they did one that said Logan Sargent 1 race wins, and I'm like, you're gonna keep that in the back pocket. It's never gonna be used.
It honestly made me laugh when I saw that, and I was like, I want to know what other graphics they have now that they're ready to just flash on the screen at a moment's notice. So
I do think so. Some good moments of that race was the start by George Russell was incredible. Channeling this kind of inner Fernando Alonso there by overtaking on the outside and then just squeezing his way through Max and Lando to get to P1. Unfortunately, had a tough race from there, but I think the real bad. I don't understand Sergio Perez at all right now. He
I
finishes
love
59
the
seconds behind his teammate.
I love the memes of how to bring him back to the front of the grid. They're going to turn Max's car into a two-seater.
Or my favorite was that, if everybody on Instagram has seen the Huck to memes, how it was the caption was going, how did you get your two-year extension at Red Bull? And it's basically Sergio's face over that. Gotta give the Huck to and spit on that thing.
I was gonna say I on Reddit it's more of him on a milk carton like lost like where is Checo? So
Oh man, poor guy. I don't
I
know
think
what's going on.
and I think this is a good segue like going into Austria and even leading into Austria there was like a lot of drama that is former Renault Formula One boss Flavio I'm gonna butcher his
Briatore.
Briatore, thank you, has been appointed executive advisor to the Alpine team. For those that don't know, he's it's a return for him. He was forced to resign in 2009 in the wake of the controversy over the fixing of the Singapore Grand Prix.
Oh,
Uh,
loud.
and now there's talk of them trying to get Carlos Sainz to come to Alpine. Okay, sure, like welcome back, I guess.
I think Sainz to Williams also has some straight because there's some rumors that Logan Sargent signed next season in IndyCar.
Interesting. I didn't hear that Logan was looking to move somewhere else, but there's been strong things, and even Carlos has hinted that it's now time to make a decision. So it sounds like he's been in talks with a couple of teams. There's also been Mick testing the Alpine, so there's the possibility that he'll move away from Mercedes into that seat. And I think a lot of folks knew he had a strong relationship with the team even a couple years ago before Gasly moved because they noticed that he and some of the executives were very buddy-buddy at a function and were following each other on social media. So a lot of question marks around who's going to take Ocon's seat at Alpine. There's been a lot of questions confirmed that Liam Lawson is signing with the Red Bull development team. So wondering what's going to happen with Yuki and Daniel, if someone's going to move, if someone's going to be released from the team. We know it won't be Yuki because he just resigned, but there's always the possibility that, after this 1-year extension, he'll go somewhere else. And maybe Danny Rick is in talks with moving to someone on another team. So I think that midsummer break, y'all, we're going to get some of that silly seasoning on it that we've been looking for.
And that's only 4 races. That's 4 Grand Prix weekends away.
My goodness. It is coming up quick.
I think the real question, though, that's really burning everybody's mind is if Max Verstappen is a reptile or not.
What?
Oh, we've got all these reptilians controlling our minds and we're an experiment for them, right? Isn't that what Danica Patrick was talking about?
Yeah, they're getting scared. They're having, because the humans are gaining too much power in the world as well. So do you think Lando would be then a human making Max a reptile in that case because he's scared he's getting too much power at McLaren?
Or do you think Yuki is a reptile?
I think he could be he's like a sleeper agent for them. The Galactic Federation kind of sent him in to go under the radar. But for anyone who's like, what are these people talking about? Danica Patrick was on this podcast and went off about these conspiracy theories. So if anyone doesn't know, I've heard about these rumblings for decades where people believe that there is these people, they're like aliens, but they're reptile and they can look like they're humans, but with the changing in frequencies, vibrations, and stuff on the planet, their facades might get dropped and reveal them as the reptiles they are, and that these people control a lot of stuff in the world, and it includes who was it? Even musicians and stuff. I think Adele was one.
My favorite one is that Justin Bieber is one, and that he's going to accidentally shapeshift on stage of a concert once, and they're going to have to do the Men in Black where they erase people's memory like they did the Incredibles too, erase everybody's memory there.
Oh my God.
But just remember, everybody, this reality is a simulation, and whenever we're going to die, we go back to the source.
It made me think a little bit about safety. So one of my coworkers, Joey, brought it up where apparently NASCAR has no concussion protocol. And they're only just starting to introduce one. So for a lot of the drivers, it's why Dale Earnhardt Jr. struggled for so long, because it wasn't until he started going into therapy for CTE and stuff that, he was mentally healing and able to start performing again. So people are like, is this her CTE starting to show? And now I'm kind of wondering, like, do you guys know, does F1 have a concussion protocol? Like, if someone has like a gnarly crash, what
Yeah,
happens?
I think, well, like you have the medical car, like the safety car comes, and I think they are registered.
But like, you have to imagine with the G-forces they're pulling into some of these crashes, like, someone's gonna have a concussion. Like, what, I'm surprised that no one's ever had to like sit out a race after a bad crash. Like, if you think about Zhou a couple of years ago.
Well, I think they've done such a great job with safety because when you see like they're locked in really tight with their head, helmet wise too. They have like the supports, with the Halo too. I really think, they've gone like light years in terms of safety. But I do think when they have like for instance, Verstappen's crash at Silverstone in 2021, I'm pretty sure he had to clear a medical protocol in order to be able to return back. So
Okay.
I think there is that, and I believe concussions are integrated.
I don't know who put this in this document, was if it was pulled from the summary, but it says, I have to say, they make a lot of good points at the end
It
here.
was
That was
someone's tweet.
that was
It
the
was someone's
tweet. That was
tweet.
the
Yeah, let's
tweet.
be clear. We're not agreeing with any of the comments that she was making,
I
but
just, I was like, who wrote this? But, oh man. On a more positive note, though, as some of you know, Richie and I, along with his father and one of my friends, Danielle, were able to go to the pre-showing of the F1 exhibition here in Toronto, and they have now extended the dates beyond July.
10
This
more
is
weeks, which
awesome.
is incredible.
Yeah, so I know Vienna just closed, but it's now through mid-September, I want to say.
yeah,
What's the deal, Richie?
yeah. So the F1 exhibition is going to be extended till September 15th. I think it was supposed to only go till July, but popular demand, and honestly, if you've not got our targeted ads of Erica's comments of how great the exhibition was, definitely get your tickets now. I think I've been getting like some notifications of like 10%, 20% off. So take advantage of those like discounts that come in. But I mean, it's great to see that it's continued support for this. And I mean, like it was so much fun. I would go again if we can.
It was honestly, I feel like there are more. I was worried about like holding other people up because it wasn't busy, so there wasn't like a flow of other people to follow to know how fast you're supposed to go through it. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance to go, I highly recommend going. If you have gone, I don't know, it's summertime. If you've got youngins or people visiting in from out of town, feel free to take them there if they're fans of the sport. Even if they're not fans of the sport, it's very well air conditioned and it's great to get away from the heat we've been having in Toronto and to just support a sport that's really growing at a rapid pace in North America. So yeah, shout out F1 exhibition.
Austria. What are we thinking for this weekend? And the sprint race is back.
Oh, is it a sprint race weekend?
It is a
Exciting.
sprint race weekend. 71 laps, 4.3 kilometers. Lap record was Carlos Sainz at a minute and 5 seconds. Verstappen has won this track 4 times: 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2023. Of the current grid, Hamilton won in 2016, Bottas 2017 and 2020, and Charles Leclerc won it in 2022. Yeah, I mean, I think track limits is a question. If everybody remembers last year, the amount of track limits that were handed to a number of people, apparently they quote unquote fixed it. They didn't listen to us, unfortunately. They put some gravel. I don't know if that's really going to stop anything. I think maybe gravel is just going to fire off everywhere when people continue to go off. But
I don't know. I think they're hoping it's just going to make everyone a little bit more cautious going into that turn so that they don't go outside of the track limits. But I don't, I agree. I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I do think this is going to be a real test of where the teams are at. We always see a lot of super fun racing in Austria. I believe we were supposed to get a ton of rain when people were looking at the forecast earlier this week, which is just going to spell chaos and a really great time for those of us who are not sitting in it and watching the fiasco go down. I'm kind of hopeful to see what goes down between some of these teams. Will we have a new pole sitter? We've had 4 different pole sitters, but maybe it'll be time for Lewis to show us his stuff, especially if it's rainy conditions. Maybe we'll see Oscar do surprisingly well if he's really hungry after the P7 this week. I don't think Checo's going to be up there, but I don't know. He's Max's teammate. What do I know? and maybe we'll see the Ferraris have a comeback. So I think it's kind of anyone's game, especially when you got to play the long game with this track and really be thinking a few moves ahead.
I really do think it's going to be the Max versus Lando show this week. And I think the both of them are kind of at the top of their game right now. Lando has performed well in Austria before in the past as well, too. So I think that confidence will lead into him. And I really think they're going to be the two front runners to determine who will win both races. Little fun sleeper. I wonder to see if Haas can pull off a win based on their performance last week, where they had their F1 Academy race driver win a race in Barcelona.
Heck
Shout out Chloe Chambers. So highly doubt it will happen, but you never know in this day and age.
They got big shoes to fill then.
Absolutely.
Miracles happen.
I think I'm going to go to the edge to Lando, just with the success that has been lately, and just the motivation to really want to push Max. But I also like Mercedes and Ferrari can always make it interesting, and especially now that there's the sprint race. I'm curious to see how the teams are. Also going to keep my eye on, is Alpine going to continue this tradition of 9-10, and like what's going to happen to Williams and like Aston Martin, and like, is there going to be some improvements this weekend, and especially how short this track is? Time will tell. But you'll see us next week as we'll provide our summary of the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. My name is Ricci, co-hosts Andrew and Erica. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode. And make sure to check us on our social media channels on Linktree. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Threads, and I think I got all of them.
TikTok.
And TikTok, because we make some great content on there too.
Damn right we do.
I need to be better at it, but we do our best.
Yeah. So tune into next week as we cover the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. Who's going to win? Is it going to be Max Verstappen? Is it going to be Lando? Or will we get someone from Ferrari or Mercedes? Time will tell, but we'll see you in next week's episode. Thanks so much for the support, everyone.
Cheers.